That's all set, that's all set. And the first one was supposed to be capital review. Are you ready for the capital review, or we want to do the cemetery first?
I've been waiting.
The cemetery?
Yep.
Why don't you go ahead and come up? Oh, this is for anybody that wants to read it.
How we doing?
Fine, thanks.
Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Go.
Okay. What we're requesting tonight is I'm sorry, just names, so we know.
Jim Burlingame,
Jim.
Cemetery Superintendent.
Donna Nealon, Cemetery Commissioner, Clerk, Member, Vice Chair, everything. Oh,
Make it the capital list.
I have one, yes.
Okay.
So what we're looking to request funding for our capital, part of our five-year capital plan this year is the construction of a new building for the cemetery department. It's going to be a maintenance building, storage, like a garage, so to speak, to house some of the equipment that we have. Because the building we have right now is definitely inadequate. It's just too small to store all our.
Where is it, Jim?
So we're looking at Westridge Cemetery, the main cemetery behind the library building, right across the street.
That's where the current building is?
And that's where we're proposing the new building as well. We're trying to put it kind of in conjunction with the existing building, because we're gonna keep that building in place, perhaps tie in the service for electricity, plumbing if need be, if code requires us to have a bathroom in the building due to the square footage, what have you. So logistically, it's close, it's nearby the other building, so I think it'd be a lot easier to tap in for electricity and heat and so on and so forth. I think we originally had asked, I think it would be put on the capital request for $100,000. I have a quote from February 1st, 2018 from Morton Metal Buildings, and that's just a building itself. And back then it was like $93,000. And I just got a current quote yesterday, actually today, from Morton Metal Buildings. And the price went up $10,744 to $103,000, $103,955. And that's just for the building. Very limited. I don't think there's any electrical tie-in. That's going to have to be done like by us or whomever. I contacted a local contractor, P&P contractor out of Delhi, Charlton. They do a lot of public works jobs. I believe this job is going to fall under the DCAM regulations for state, which is the prevailing wage division of capital asset management and maintenance. It's kind of an involved process, if you will, because it is through the state. It's all part of the prevailing wage program that the state pretty much enforces. I was looking at some of the guidelines. I think if the I'm not a professional in this, but if it falls into $150,000, it might be exempt, but I definitely need to do a little bit more work on my end to see. Right now, with the proposed site that we have, it's on kind of a steep bank, and we're gonna have to bank it up. There's gonna have to be some engineering, some drainage, code enforcement issues, if you will. It's gonna fall under for energy code for heating, so there's going to have to be adequate insulation put in the building to meet the newer mass energy codes. So right now we're looking, again, it's probably kind of shooting from the hip, but I'm thinking $150,000 over, so $50,000 over what we originally were looking for.
What's the size?
30 by 50. We're looking at a 12 by 12 overhead door, one man door. Maybe have the option of housing an office in that building as well, have my office be down there, all my records, all my files, all the stuff that we need for, you know, the operation of the
Your
department.
current office in the
It's in
current
the, it's in the
building?
town hall building right now, and I know it's been a subject of conversation to have, you know, to free up some space for future departments and future needs. So it's been looked at before to have me maybe relocate outside this building. But ideally, if we're gonna do that, we would like to stay at the cemetery. So we have everything we need at our fingertips, where we work, do 90% of our work probably out of Westridge Cemetery. We do have other satellite cemeteries as well, but for the main part, all our equipment and so forth is at Westridge Cemetery, because that's where most of the burials take place and maintenance.
What's the size of the current building?
28 by 28, and that has probably an 8-foot by 6-foot bathroom, and it has a 8-foot by probably 12-foot office space, if you will. It's just like one half of like one part of the garage. A third of the garage from the front to the back is just like the office area and the rest of the bathroom facility. So.
Would this be close enough to the other building that you wouldn't need put a bathroom in the building that you're talking about, or are they at opposite ends of the cemetery?
Nope, it's gonna be right near it. Like I said, it's gonna be right, you know, and logistically, it's gonna be right next to it. I don't know what code's gonna make me do. It might be an issue where you have to have a building because of square footage that I'm not a professional in. I mean, I could do without it, but maybe to meet the requirements, I might have to have a bathroom facility.
If you made that building contiguous to the other building, be all one building, would that?
The only issue with that is we have a septic system on one edge of the building, and we have an underground utility line on the other side, because when they built the library, when they finished the library project about 10 years ago, they went from overhead service to underground service. Now the underground service is on that one side of the building, and we have the septic system on the other side, the septic tank on the other side, so we're kind of landlocked. And in the back of the building, it's really close to the ball field. So there's no room there either. And the front of the building, it's right at the edge of the parking lot, so you're kind of limited. My hands are tied there too, because I thought about that. Maybe making a lean-to or making it bigger, but that building's built on a slab, and the slab has cracks. So I don't think it would pass code. It would have to be frost walls and things like that.
And what kind of equipment, a backhoe, I'm assuming, and some mowers and?
Yeah,
other-
probably like a mini excavator, digging machine, you know, in the future. We have a dump truck that stays on site pretty much all the time right now for burial operations. Mowing equipment, tractors, zero-turn mowers, you know, your basic maintenance equipment for landscaping.
All this stuff is stuffed in that 28 by 28?
Nope, I have stuff at the chapel over at Northside, the Northside Cemetery Chapel, the Memorial Chapel. We keep stuff over there off-site storage, so to speak.
Trailer.
We have a enclosed trailer. We keep equipment in there, locked up trailer, and we keep stuff at the old Hearst House over at Bay Pass Cemetery. So we're spread out all over the place. You know, when you get to change on the seasons, like right now, we're looking at fall. I spend a few days just moving stuff back and forth to, you know, take out the leaf removal equipment, put away some of the mowing equipment. Logistically, it's a nightmare. So we'd like to maybe have it one building, one area, and just work out that and just have it. I think if we put some sweat equity into this building, if maybe the highway department, they've always been really good helping us out in the past, and maybe if they can help us with some of the site preparation, we can save ourselves a lot of money and maybe a lot of expense. So, I mean, I think right now, $150,000 would probably be a conservative figure, but it's definitely a start. We're gonna have to get some engineering done and maybe talk with conservation, make sure we're not gonna be in any violation of wetlands or anything like that, because there is a wet area in the back, but I don't know if it's necessarily deemed wet, but we'd have to have a conversation with the conservation administrator as well.
Okay, any other questions? So right now, you're looking for roughly 150,000? Yeah.
That is correct.
Right, so you make that notation.
Yeah. All right, if no other questions, I guess you're all set unless you've got something else.
I do have an updated quote. I can leave it with the finance director or one of you if you like, if you want to check it out, look at it. Kind of gives you some of the building specs that we're looking at, as well as some of the dimensions and some just CAD plans, so to speak. Kind of gives you an idea what we're looking at.
Yeah,
Yeah, leave it with Sherry,
Yeah.
maybe, Sherry, you can scan this stuff and attach it to the minutes as an addendum.
I could email, I could forward an email as
Oh,
well.
could you
too,
do
if
that
want.
too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And Donna, you want a copy of it too?
Yes.
All right, so yeah, if you give that one right, and then we get the
Yeah.
attachments.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you,
You
Jim.
have, thank you for your time.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Don.
much.
How big was the building? 50 by 50? How big was the building? 50 by 50?
30 by 50.
30 by 50.
Next up was supposed to be highway. Is highway here?
I saw Mark.
Robin? This 5-year plan that we're working off of here is dated February 21st. Do you have an updated?
That one would have been when we did annual town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what they're doing now is they're coming in and talking about some changes.
Right.
I will give you one, an updated one with what they have and the recommendations at your next meeting. But if you want me to go look and see if they've given me changes.
yeah, no, I just didn't know whether you had one ready, like this one, ready to go that was maybe a little more current, that's all.
Not yet, right?
Okay,
Okay.
well, we can work off of this one.
You're up.
Good afternoon. Mark Oliver, Highway. I'll be stepping in for Jerry tonight. I don't know if you have the paperwork, but we're looking for 3 trucks this year. A pickup, a small 1-ton dump, and the bigger truck of a sander. I'm in desperate need of them.
Okay, so right now we've got a Ford F-350 pickup.
No, F-250 pickup.
Oh. And,
Then there'd be an F-350 dump truck.
yeah, you got a, well, it says Freightliner, but,
No, here's the dump truck, there's just no dollar value. That was actually,
I have the dollar value if you need it.
okay,
okay. So these are F-350, so you're talking about F-250s?
The pickup we bumped down the sides to try to save some money.
Okay, so that's this one,
You
that's
know
the
what?
pickup.
This one, I don't think got funded last year, and that's why he's saying 3, because that's in this year's request.
And, let's see. We're working on 19, aren't we?
Right, no, we're working on 20.
Working on 20.
Oh,
We're still in 19.
19,
Yeah?
yeah.
I always thought you did the, okay.
All right, so right now you've got a dump truck, it's called a Freightliner, that's 140,000?
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe it's different, but,
No, I think the prices went up. 152,000.
that makes sense.
That's with the sander.
Okay. And then you had the pickup truck, and that was roughly 39?
The F-250
Yeah.
would be $37,839.
And what was the other one? Because I only,
It'd be an F-350 dual rear wheel dump truck, 1
Okay.
ton.
and that's roughly 55?
Yeah, it's 54, 634, 20.
No, we'll just put 55. Okay, so you're looking for 152 for the dump truck,
Yes.
55 for a medium-sized dump truck,
Yep.
and then roughly 38,000 for the four-wheel drive pickup.
About 242?
Every one of them will be equipped with snowplow when they're ready.
Yeah, okay. Any questions on the equipment?
You don't happen to have a up-to-date list of your current equipment, do you?
Yes, I do. Would you like to see it? or-
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, we would.
On the Freightliner, which is that really going to be a Freightliner, or is that going to be something else?
Be a Freightliner.
Yeah.
Freightliner.
Is that already specified? I mean, not to buy it, but I mean, you already have a list of what you need on the truck and
Yes.
everything else?
Would you like that too?
Yeah, I'd like to see it, yeah.
Would these 3 vehicles be replacing 3 on this one? Or in addition to?
I have a 1995 and 2 1996s that are had it on the big trucks. My older 2006 1-ton dump is just really worn out. And the pickup, one of the pickups have had it. These are 3 trucks that'll be out every day in the winter. And in the summer, the smaller trucks, all spring, summer, and fall.
Here's an up-to-date one.
Oh, no problem.
Anyone else want to look at the specifications for the Freightliner?
Now, this is still a draft, so I don't even know if it's gonna match what they're asking for, but it's the latest one.
Well, I'll just write draft up at the top, that's all.
I just got all these through Freightliner.
I'm sorry, so you mentioned the trucks that you're gonna take out of service. The first was a 95,
Well, I'm gonna run it until I can't run it anymore, but I can't even get parts for them.
is that the 95 International?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that one's coming out. What was the next one?
Then I got two 1996 L8000s that I use every storm. They're main runners.
Oh. Fords, all right.
Then I got a 2006 one-ton that still goes out every day, but it's very tired, it's very rusted. And the pickups are definitely getting used every day. The 2008, the engine, the guy thought I had a diesel on it the other day with the gas.
Wouldn't shut off.
No, that's how bad it's rapping.
Anyone else want to? The two small Fords, are they diesel or are they being gas?
Gas. They're a lot cheaper to buy, they're just as good, cheaper to maintain, and they start no problem.
As long as you push the snow and get you where you gotta go.
Yes.
Any other questions on the equipment for the highway?
No, but if we can make sure that that gets PDF'd and sent to each of us through that list.
Yeah,
of
that list,
vehicles.
yes. Can you send us a
Want me to get
PDF
a
of?
copy of that for you now?
That would be nice.
I'd be glad to. It's part of my exercise program.
Any other questions on highways equipment?
You can
got
see
one to
on
s-
that list, I also have a 1984 loader that's broken. I'm asking for a bare minimum right now with these three trucks. We've been pushing our vehicles way too long.
84.
Don't you, do you have a new one due in, like, within the next couple
Well,
of
we have
months?
that coming up in the next 2 years, but I'm just giving you a heads up that the other one is
No, no, I
completely
thought
gone.
that you had ordered a dump and sander last year, and it was due in sometime September, October, November of this
We
year.
got it in February.
Okay.
If you look at this Freightliner, it's a 2020. That's how long it's gonna take us to get it.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
won't even have it this winter.
Yeah, I think Jerry told us that last spring, that it was due in, and, yeah, it came in, so,
The pickup and the 1-ton, we can get a lot quicker. We'll have those for this winter if they're approved.
yeah. Yeah, the big one takes a lot longer, so.
Like I said, you see, it's a 2020. It's as quick as we can get it.
Oh, and she's got the list, so.
Yeah.
All right, if that's it, then you're all set for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time and your presentation.
Pleasure to meet all of you.
Man, just from Old Home Day Committee, thanks for taking care of the ramps.
Oh, no problem. Have a nice day.
You're welcome. Okay, that was highway. Police, if you're up.
I brought charts and graphs.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, very good. And just make sure Sherry gets one.
Nice to see everybody. Oops, I tore the page off of the back of it, I'm sorry. Mr. Johnson, how are you? Good to see you.
It's always a
What have you
pleasure.
been doing since you retired? Anything,
Nothing we can talk about.
at least not on camera?
Not on camera.
Okay. So the first page is the state of the fleet. We have three categories of cars, so the patrol cars, I see that there's 6 of them. If you look at the bottom, patrol number 19 and 20, 60 and 75,000. Those are the 2 that we're looking to replace. We usually get 2 marked cruisers every year. The second set of documents that I gave you is the quote, MHQ, the state bid price. It's $108,000, that's for 2. It's $108,000. 108,833. You'll also notice that our detective cars are unmarked, the 2 of them, 91,000, 63,000. And the detail cars are on the bottom. Those aren't patrol worthy. Those are cars that we put out to idle when the officers are working, for blue lights and that kind of thing, but they're not serviceable as far as patrol. They're not equipped.
So these, if you're on a detail someplace or a highway, you just drop it out there with the lights on it?
Well, usually there's a person with it,
Yeah.
but the thing is that you couldn't use it for patrol. I would just say that, the 2 cars, 19 and 20 patrol cars, these cars are run 24 hours a day, and we run 3 or 4 cars, and then we also, of course, as you know, you approve the traffic officer. He's going live October 1st. So I'm going to need, right now, we're using Cruiser 17 for that. But, so ultimately, I'm asking for 2 marked cruisers and an unmarked car. I apologize, they didn't send the quote for the unmarked. I mean, roughly, what we had for Colonial Municipal Group for a Tahoe-type vehicle was $37,000. By the time you add lights and everything to it, it's about $42,000. We may get a Challenger or something like that. Essentially, we need to put an unmarked car out there with the traffic guy. He's gonna bring in revenue, and so, as you can see, we're kind of operating on bare bones. If we have 1 car go down, we really don't have a spare. So, that's why I'm asking for 3 this year.
The traffic enforcement right now is at roughly 47,000. How much did you want? What was?
The traffic car, I want about 42, because it wouldn't, doesn't need all the bells and whistles on the outside. It'll just be
Okay,
a
that's
plain paint job, and it'll be internal lights and a radio. And the 2 of the marked cruisers, we have to upgrade the LiDAR units and all that kind of thing, so they all come as a package now. And that's state bid price, the quote that I gave you there from MHQ. So that 108, that's, those are pretty well standard, the cars that we run now.
Yeah, and that's for 2.
Yeah, that's for 2. And then, like I said, I would be asking for an additional 42,000. That would include the car and the upfitting with the lights and the radio and that kind of thing.
Would you retire 19 and 20, or did they get moved down?
They
to
get
detail
moved,
cars?
yeah, they get moved down to detail cars. Couple of these cars, as you see, 132,000, 99,000. As long as we're not sinking a whole boatload of money into them, when we send these cars out for detail, the town gets back a 25% fee of the, whatever the total amount is. So they're paid for, and of course, we're paying for gas, but the town is recouping money on the detail administrative fee to have them out there. So they're not really costing us anything other than, just oil changes and that, just to keep them roadworthy. We also have a car down at the highway that we're using for parts for the Crown Victorias, the 2011s. So when we need parts, we've been pulling off of that rather than try to buy new parts,
Now,
just-
on 19 and 20, the ones you want to replace, what are you doing with those? Those will move down to detail?
Those will move down to detail cars. And like I said, a couple of these are gonna become unserviceable at some point, because like I said, 22 has 132,000 miles on
Yeah.
it, so, and it's time. And then 21 is
Yeah.
about hitting 100,000. So if we get 75, 80,000 miles out of a car, we're doing okay. Because again, they're not getting any rest. Most of them are going 24 hours a day. I mean, obviously the traffic car isn't. And 16 I've locked in the garage. That's the one that we just, 15 and 16. We're gonna wait as long as we can to drive it so that, we're not putting miles unnecessarily. We're gonna kind of beat these to death until, and then and then go to, to the new stuff, so.
So basically, 19 and 20 would go to detail, and 21 and 22 would be retired at some point because of their age and,
Yes.
yeah, roughly speaking.
Yep.
Okay. And then you had radios for 17,000?
Yeah, 17,500. So we've done a capital, we got 17.5 last year to do 6 portables, and we'd like to do it again this year, and then again next year. Now, as I spoke to the town administrator, we do have some money. We were able to recover some grant money, and I've talked to Donna about it. So there may be some funds that are available for us that the town's been reimbursed for, that we can move around to purchase these this year, to kind of give the town a break for that. So I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to come up with that on our own. So what I really need is 3 cars.
Okay, so we can
The
take,
radios, I think we can handle ourselves within our budget right now.
okay, so the radios we can take out for now.
Yes.
Maybe next year will be different, but right now we'll take that one up. So you want 108 for the cruisers and 42 for the traffic vehicle.
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking for 150 total.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on the equipment? Well, then, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Great to
Have a
see
good night.
everybody. Thanks again.
Yeah, you got one of these too. Is fire here?
He's in the hallway.
Donna, do you have that sheet you need signed while we got a little break?
It's been going around.
Oh, has he got it? Okay, so you're all set with that? No, not this one. The one we had last meeting that I asked everybody to sign. And you now have enough signed, so you're all set.
I did give you the other request.
6,000.
Yeah.
Well, while waiting for fire, maybe we can do this one. Donna, you want to try to do this one for conservation, because they're not here?
I can wing it. So apparently, we've had a lot of rain and we have a lot of beavers. And they caused some chaos and the road was flooded, and I think it was Stafford Street. Todd was able to go out there and get the road back open again. And he has a number of invoices, which I put in the folder, that amount to 6,000 and some change, that they need to pay the bills. And so they're looking for a transfer from the flood
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
road.
So you're looking for 67.33 and 41 cents.
Yeah,
And their present balance is $5.31?
yeah, that is a, actually, that's a highway account, so it was already pretty expended from the summer. And so now there's nothing left to address the flood that happened a few weeks ago.
So the 67 is basically repaired damage from the beavers.
Yep. And
Any-
there's also, I think, in there, the cost of removing 2 beavers, or,
I thought there were pumps and stuff.
yeah, it's, I've attached all the bills in the folder.
Yeah, we've got Rain for Rent, that was 37. Jeff D. Henderson Excavating, that was 300. The police department was another 220. Advantage Enterprises was 1,000, and the Beaver Specialist, we'll let it go at that, was 1,460. So, do I hear any comments or questions on this?
I'll make a motion, we approve the transfer.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
And no further comment, then take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, abstain? No? Okay. You wanna, Kurt, are you ready? Nobody else is here, so we can maybe move along a little bit.
Get out earlier.
Make sure I get my right file. So I'm here as the building commissioner at this moment, and my big request is for a replacement pickup truck. We had, is the operative word there, had a 11-year-old Ford Ranger. The spare tire rack fell out of it. It's mounted up underneath, which led us to do some investigations underneath the truck, and we found out that the rear frame rails were rotted. We were gonna fish plate them in because, you know, the body and the engine were still pretty good, and then we got up to the front of the truck, and the frame rails in the front of the truck are rotted, and I was, according to the mechanic, 2 potholes away from ripping the front end out of it, so it immediately had to be sidelined. And,
What year was that one?
well, it's 11, 12 years old, so, you know,
2006 or so.
yeah, something like that. 70,000 miles, good engine on it, but, you know, the salt and crap.
And I'm sorry, what was this truck used for? For you to?
I'm the building inspector.
To do?
To go and do inspections, go to meetings, get into sites,
Yeah.
that sort
Yeah,
of
you
thing.
need a vehicle.
Yeah.
How much was this gonna cost for?
This is, so I have a price here, all-inclusive of $29,624.70. That's for a F-150 extended cab with suicide doors. That's the way I remember to call them. A radio, some equipment that has to go in it, and the lettering that needs to
Okay.
go on it.
This is not on our,
No, this is an addition. So roughly, you'd need at least 30,000 to cover everything.
30,000 would be a nice round number. I'll give back what I don't use.
Okay. Any questions on the building inspector's vehicle? Lack of one?
other than age, what's your average annual miles?
So 70,000, and we had it 12 years,
Okay.
you know.
Does it stay here in the town?
Yes, it
Yeah.
stays here. It was not given to me to take to and from work.
So it packs out, you go take
Parks
the
out
place and it
back.
packs out back. So that's about 5,000 or 6,000 a year, something like that.
You know, just in conversations, I'm using the assessor's car, which was purchased at the same time. It has 11,000 miles on it, but I had to put an inspection sticker on it as I was using the car, and the mechanic was pointing out the same thing. Body's in good shape, engine's in good shape. It has some more easily replaced frame rails under it, apparently.
What kind of a vehicle is that one?
Taurus.
Oh, okay. Oh, boy, that's an oldie, yeah.
11,000 miles?
We were, you know, at the time, if you wanna go back, at the time, I was doing, you know, this is pre-2008, and we were doing over 10,000 miles a year on the building inspector truck. We had a lean period there, you know, so, and now we're pushing back up. The assessors were doing the same sort of thing, and why it's not getting used as much, you know, that's a question for the assessor.
Yeah, yeah, that's not for you,
But
so.
it's just a vehicle, it's the same vintage that we see, I'm sure we see it in the police cruisers, you know, you see it in the highway trucks, you know, the undersides rot out before.
Yeah. So temporarily, you're using that because your truck is just not safe.
I took it right off the road. So it's been declared surplus by the selectmen, and it's parked up with the other surplus vehicles, and eventually the auction will happen, and we'll get whatever we get.
Any other questions for Kurt? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kurt.
You got
Okay,
lucky.
so the other thing that I
Oh, okay.
have here, and I don't know what information Robin has provided you, but I have a request in for $8,500. We service our generator out here regularly, and we had it taken apart, and some cowlings came off and stuff on its last service period, and it was pointed out that the radiator on that is leaking. It's leaking a little bit. you know, but that is a key piece of equipment. It runs the town hall when there's a power failure, and the world, as far as the internet, telephones and everything, runs around the town hall. So if we don't, service that, you know, yeah, it can limp along for a while, but when it goes, it's done.
So that'd be maintenance, right?
It's an extraordinary maintenance number. It's not easily within the $20,000 we have for town hall maintenance that we spend a year. You know,
Of course, we could do it right here.
That's a question, you know, do you wanna do it as a reserve fund transfer? That's fine. Do you want to, you know, do something
Well-
at annual town meeting? That's just the request. We need to, you know, seriously consider this problem.
Well, you definitely need it, and considering the winter that's coming up, although it doesn't snow as much as it rained, but you definitely need it this winter. It's bound to have something go out, you know, as far as power around. I have no problem with a reserve transfer. Does anyone else?
What's in our fund right now, our reserve fund? I wanna say it's about 71 or something.
I think it's reserve fund, I think it's about 60, you don't mean free cash. No, I think it's about 660.
I would give you the ballpark. Give or take 100, no.
Pretty soon, we're talking about real money.
Yeah,
90,366.59 cents.
And that has to last us until June 30th.
And that 6 or 7 grand we just approved came out of that.
Yeah.
It's already out, okay. Thank you. And how much of the town hall maintenance budget's left?
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Dana, would you know?
Less than 20?
So, I mean, we could approach it this way as an advisory request, right? That's been something we've done before. You know, is that?
Although, if you're gonna spend it, you need to know that you're gonna spend it, so.
Oh.
I would probably recommend, because it's so high, that they would just approve it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're close enough to town meeting. You have a pretty healthy reserve fund too. If
Can
you
we
wanna
add
go
that
that
later
way.
to our agenda and talk about it instead of trying to decide right this second?
Yeah.
You come back and make a recommendation.
Yeah, we can do it next, we'll probably be back here next week anyway.
Yeah.
No, it's just, it should all be part of the review of the goals, and
Yeah,
to me, anyway, it should be.
Okay.
all right.
Thank you much.
Thank you very much. And fire is up if you,
It's when you make snap decisions, it's always.
Evening.
good evening.
So, obviously, I'm here for, the big elephant in the room is the staffing issue. The grant that we received to fund 9 firefighters is due in January of this year. Prior meetings, the town agreed to retain 4 of those positions. So, and then we hired a deputy chief. So what I'm looking for is to have those positions fully funded through the rest of the year, which is in about $130,000. But that number may be less, and that's dependent, but for those 5 positions right now, basically what I did is I took half the year and included any holiday pay for the bottom 5 on the salary, on the seniority list to come up with that figure. And if you can see in the justification for the capital expense, there's documentation there that shows the benefits that we've encountered with these 9 positions. For the last 2.5 years that we've had these positions, we've been able to push our ambulance receipts over $1 million every year. We've also been able to reduce our overtime expense, in that we have, with 5 a shift, we're able to go down to a minimum without incurring, a minimum of 4 without incurring any overtime expense. If we go back to a 4-member shift, it becomes a 1-for-1 overtime, so anytime anybody's out, I have to incur overtime to fill that position. And with the documentation presented, we've had in fiscal year 18, a savings of over $296,000 in overtime. And so far this year, from July, August through last week in September, we've already had a savings of $54,000 in overtime expense. So that's one of the, one of the items I'm looking for. And then the other item, well, first off, are there any questions regarding the staffing?
So that gets them from, and if I remember, we didn't put it in the original budget because there was the possibility you might get this renewed.
Right, and that grant was submitted, and I have heard nothing back. And just to give you some history, another grant that I filed for prior to that one, about 6 months prior to that one, I just heard back from 2 weeks ago, which was over a year in the making. So my anticipation, my personal opinion is it's gonna be at least another 6-7 months before I hear on that. And my gut feeling is, since we got the grant once, probably not gonna get it again. But that's my gut feeling.
All right, so, and this 103 gets us through June 30th,
Correct.
so that next year's budget, you're gonna be looking,
I will
I'm
be
assuming, to fully fund.
keep them fully funded, yes.
What is the fully funded cost of these
For
5
those
guys for
5
next fiscal year?
positions, 260? 260.
260 for wages plus
I already have the
allowances.
I already
Yeah.
have the benefits.
And the benefits, you,
Already
Donna,
worked,
are in
yeah.
there? The 260 covers the training and the uniforms and, okay.
I don't know what they,
Well, contractually, there's other stuff, right? There's $950 for each individual for uniform allowance and stuff like that.
Right.
That's an annual fee?
It's per the contract.
As per the,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
So it's 260 plus would be,
Incidentals, yeah.
right.
Plus
But
another
but what you're gonna
5,000.
be probably adding on to your next year's budget request.
Correct.
For the annual year. Okay.
Correct.
So you're looking at 280, 290.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, wait a minute, they're already funded. Or are they,
No,
They're funded through
Would it-
December.
They're funded through, January 9th is the last.
January,
is the
okay,
day
thank
it
you.
ends. So they're funded through that. I'm looking for the rest of
The
the
rest of the
year.
year.
And then, obviously, budget cycle come the new fiscal year.
yeah,
The
I
request
wasn't
will
sure
be
if we
there.
were a full half year there or not, that's all.
It's kind of like 5 months or something. Right?
Yeah.
4 months. Yeah. And if we weren't to do this and you had to go back to 4, does it still allow you to run 3 ambulances, for instance, or?
Probably not, because that'll only give me 4 on the floor, so it's 2 per ambulance. So that, simple math is, that's 2 ambulances.
Yep. With nobody left behind.
Right, it would just be myself or the deputy chief behind.
And what's the financial impact if you had to take a 3rd ambulance off the road and only run the 2, for instance, okay?
Per call, every ALS call is potential receivables up to $3,000 per call. It's about 1,800 to 2,000 for a BLS call, and that's per call.
Okay.
And again, call volume already this year is up. We expect to exceed last year's record numbers. We're looking at over 2,600 calls for this year, so we're already up. And in the documentation that I provided, you can see where our biggest problem before the grant was we were calling in mutual aid so much, and we weren't able to go out and provide mutual aid. With the grant, you can see the figures, they've flip-flopped. We're actually providing more mutual aid and, more importantly, handling our own calls in the town. And we have, it's drastically reduced the amount of times we're calling another community and to assist us.
I'm assuming, and sorry if I didn't read it detail enough, that there's a cost associated with mutual aid, whether it's requested or given.
No, well, no, there's not, but there is in certain situations. But the biggest thing is the cost there is, if you don't do the call, even if it's in your town, you don't get to bill for it. So that's revenue we're missing.
Okay.
And it would take, for example, if you got the call and had to go out to a certain part of town, might be 20 minutes. But if you had mutual aid, it would take 30 or 40 minutes?
Yeah, by the time all that radio transaction history takes place, you're looking at an extended scene and arrival time.
Yeah, that's
which
not-
is a big part of what we were looking at when we applied for the grant.
Yeah, that's not so good for the patient.
Not so good for the patient.
I think one of the things way back when we first looked at picking up more on the ambulances is that we wanted more care to the people of the town, that we could provide quicker access for them to get to the hospital or wherever they had to get to.
Correct.
And that's one of the reasons we were willing to go ahead with the extra 4 people, for the I'm talking about the ambulances. So I think, to me, I'd like to keep that up, just for the benefit of the town people that need an ambulance.
Yeah, the only time now where we're not able to respond is when we have what we call simultaneous calls, and it's usually, we'll handle back-to-back calls, no problem. It's that third call that comes in, and surprisingly enough, it happens about 30% of the time in our call volume. So there's a big chance there that if you're, and I don't wanna put the fear of anybody into anybody, but if you're the third call and you're the one that calls 10 seconds later than the second call, there's a chance that you're gonna have to wait.
Yep. There'll be a delay. Okay.
Any other questions on the grant and the paying for the extra firefighters for the next roughly 6 months?
I don't know.
Okay, did you want to move over to the vehicle?
Sure. I'm also looking to replace a 2008 Ford Expedition. Based on the current mileage, it's probably up to 103 right now, 103,000. We've run into some serious issues with it the last couple of months, in excess of $2,500, where it's had to be towed twice from on a call. It wouldn't work afterwards. And if you see, the maintenance cost since 2016 is over 10 grand for this vehicle. What I'd like to do is replace it, and attached is a quote according to the state bid list. It's $42,266.01. And I also have attached the vehicle replacement plan for the next 10 years in the fire department. So basically, that's showing you what our game plan is. And the game plan is to replace the admin vehicles every 6 years. And those admin vehicles then get dropped down to a reserve status, where they become what we call a chase vehicle, which is the third person that goes to the ambulance call in the event that extra help is needed. So that's what I would plan on doing with this vehicle, is replace my vehicle, have my vehicle go into the fire prevention, for the fire prevention officer, and then 6 years later, that gets replaced out. So that's what the plan is for that.
And that's a Chevy Tahoe that you're looking at, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Where's Merrick? Where's that dealer from?
He's on the North Shore somewhere. We've used him in the past only because he's on the state bid list.
Yeah, Arlington.
Have you tried Colonial? The only reason I'm asking is because the police chief bought one through there. And base price was $35,677.
Was
for the
that a
base.
Tahoe?
Yep, same thing, 2018 though. And they're starting at $46,599. Before you upfit it with
And
the other
again, I
stuff.
just went off the state bid list, so
Yeah.
it was the one that we've done business. I can surely, look for the,
I think you can save, if you can save a few grand.
absolutely.
It all helps in the end.
Absolutely.
Now, what's
But
the
again, I
net,
wanted to provide you with some sort of hard figure so you had an idea
Yep.
of where it was.
so SSV is a special service vehicle? Well, it says Chevy Tahoe SSV. So I'm presuming that's some sort of a model.
Yeah, I think that's the model based on, it meets the, the specs for a safety vehicle.
Yeah, and that's from the state. So you didn't ask for Premier then?
No. Basically, it's a mirror image of the current one I have now.
Any questions on the vehicle? So I guess you're all set then. If there's anything else?
No, I
you're
appreciate
all set.
the time you take to listen to me, and if there's any more information that you need, don't hesitate to ask, and you can give me a call down at the station.
Okay, well, I thank you for your time and your documentation. It's very, very complete.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's that? Who the heck is that?
That's it, that's all of it.
No, we got water and sewer. Is water and sewer here?
It's early, right?
Yeah.
Way early.
Yeah, things are going well. Rob, is there anything you want to do in between?
Yes, you had asked for a calculation of free cash, and Donna has put together that. She should come up and do it.
Yep.
You'll probably be sorry you asked, because I get excited with numbers.
I feel for you, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to give you kind of a, because you had some new members, and I wasn't sure where everybody was on how it calculates, but I know that you get the email from the state when it gets calculated. So the first 2 pages are the retained earnings and how they calculate water retained earnings. And what I did is I gave you a snapshot of the balance sheet that I submitted, and I put a comparison with the first column being fiscal 2017. And then tried to explain how I had to try to get this back in 18 to what is being requested now by the Department of Revenue. This year, when you went to submit, they make you go through the gateway with a template. And so there is no room to make your own fund balance reserved for it. It's only the allowed ones. I had also been told to not have capital projects that belong to enterprise funds within the enterprise fund, and to put them into capital projects. So I'm just gonna kind of go over, there was some changes that were made by required by the state, and there were also some changes that was required by the auditor. So when you look at to the right of that grade up and down line, you have your normal water enterprise fund for 2018. Then there's a column that says betterment committed interest refunds, a column that says debt repayment, and a total column that says for water enterprise. The 2 columns in the middle were requested by the auditor. We had them in the general fund. Those are your refunds to people who have paid the betterment and the committed interest. And the other one was for the debt that we were gonna pay down. They don't want it showing in the general fund, they want it showing in the enterprise fund, but I didn't want it to be confusing to the commissioners because this was for a very specific purpose. So I gave them different fund numbers and just consolidated them. The other piece that you see off to the right, that there's two more capital project funds. They had two water capital projects, which you see the little grade box in the first column under 2017. It says 167,265.84. Those were for those two capital projects that I have on the right. I had to move them out. Those projects are done, and I've talked with the commissioners. We're gonna be closing those out. But that's why there's a difference between 2017 and 2018. We had a lot of corrections to do. The items under fund balances, if they're grayed out, those are things that they don't like to see in there. They don't particularly like carry forward articles, but they will allow it because for the betterments and the debt service. They won't allow it for a capital project. You need to move that out. So the second page for water shows you how they make the calculation. And this is where you start to understand how mistakes could happen and why they don't want things certain ways. So in 17, I've put boxes around the numbers that they use. They actually use the cash balance. So in 17 column, when they certified, they used a 322,636 as their base. For when we did the FY19 certification, they used the FY 2018 total cash of 1,218,470, and they round when they're doing this. They then remove and subtract anything that's a liability or a reserved fund balance. So you can see that they take out things like warrants payable, accrued payrolls, any of those fund balances that were reserved. So even though the debt service and that betterment refund was added in, it doesn't count towards their retained earning. It gets subtracted back out. So they ended up with a 260,233 as their retained earnings certification for water. Same kind of goes for sewer. Those are on pages 3 and 4. This is where the danger lies. This is, they had embedded a sewer millennium and a sewer capital cash accounts, and they had reserved it special, which is not allowed to be that way, so I've moved them into trust funds. You can see that the big box on 2017 is that all three of those numbers would have been included when they started the calculation for the retained earnings. Unfortunately, because I had pointed out that it was reserved for a particular purpose, they did subtract it out, so it was not part of the retained earnings last year, but that's an easy mistake that could have happened, that those big numbers would have added into retained earnings. That's why they don't want it in there. So we've reclassed those out, and so 2,115,335 was the starting cash balance that they use. Same thing, they're subtracting out your warrants payable, accrued payroll. Those are, if you're not familiar with that, those warrants payable is that last warrant that I pay in June. It belongs to the prior fiscal year, so they want it subtract out. Accrued payroll is that, usually that last week of June that is paid in July. They want to make sure that you're subtracting out all obligations out of that cash amount. Also in this, I have a fund balance reserved for future debt. That is anything that we owe in debt still for principal, less any betterments that we're still outstanding to collect. So I'm reserving the debt capacity there. That usually happens because people have paid in advance their betterments, and usually you kind of time it equally, but somebody comes in, they're selling their house, they pay off their betterment, you need to reserve all that because it was designed to pay for the debt. So that's why it's reserved. They ended up with a $802,952 certification of retained earnings in sewer. So general fund is on the next two pages. General fund is a little bit different than retained earnings, they don't use cash. And I just did a comparison from 17 to 18. And on the free cash page, they take that ending undesignated fund balance that's near the bottom of your page. So for this fiscal 2019, they use the 18 balance sheet of 1,881,877. They take out any personal property receivables, which is from up top, and any real estate receivables from up top, and add back any deferred revenue. The combination of those three numbers is actually what your allowance for abatements and exemptions are. I'm not sure why they do it this way, but that's the way they do it. And then the flexible piece is whatever they're gonna hit you for deficit balances. And in this case, we had 301,773, which gave us a certification of 1,333,620. On page 7, I have the list of what made up that 301. These are items that as of June 30th, there was a deficit in the account. Now, I can accrue revenue if at the time I'm submitting the balance sheet, we've already received it. So we've received it in July or August. Some of these were not received at the time I did the submission, so they deduct. Next year, we'll have received it, so that gets removed. That's kind of the moving target. Most of these, from Safer Grant to Potter Village, are grants that were, other than Potter Village, grants that we have probably already received the revenue by now. Potter Village is a reimbursable grant, but because this particular project, you have to do the entire project before you submit for reimbursement. This is a large project. We did have a bond authorization because we weren't sure how high this number was going to be because it crossed 2 years, 2 fiscal years. When talking to the treasurer, we decided against borrowing short-term because there is a cost to borrow, and felt that the 154 was a relatively small amount compared to the total cost of the project, and that it was probably just not better to incur the extra cost. The dump truck was just an oversight. When the treasurer borrowed, she transposed and borrowed $1,000 less than what she should have, so she'll pick that up in the next time she borrows, and that'll clear that out to zero. Uniform withholding, I think I've mentioned before that as I'm going through and trying to clean up things, withholdings is one of the areas that I need to spend some time on. Uniform withholding was one of them. It's been inching up. We've identified what the problem is and have corrected it now going forward, so that shouldn't be an issue next year. And the police outside detail, I don't want anyone to have a cow. No worries. That's just a timing issue. I run a receivable, so I know that there's enough receivable to wipe this out. It's just I've paid the officers on by June 30th, but I haven't received payment yet. But I have more than the $23,000 in receivables to cover that. And then the question on number 8 is probably how most people think about free cash, even though I've showed you what they do technical to get to it. This is what most people are looking for, is give you an idea, and I just kind of rounded the numbers of how you got to get to this amount. So I closed article carry forwards. These are articles that had been appropriated in prior years and the projects are done, and I've closed that out, and so you gained $46,150 from there. Encumbrances are from last year, things that they said they were needed to make expenses, and we encumbered the money, but maybe the expense came in less than what they had encumbered. We closed out $7,750. I closed out overlay surplus. Overlay surplus last year, you don't always have overlay surplus. When I came in, there was an excessive amount of money in overlay. After working with the assessors, we declared a surplus in the overlay. Once that was declared, you spent money at 2 of the town meetings against the overlay surplus. And then it requires at June 30th, if you have any money left in overlay surplus, that it closes out. And there was a balance of 14,600 that had not been used that we closed out. The next item was bond premiums. This was originally when you went out to bond for projects that had debt exclusions. You received a premium, and that premium has to be used over the length of the debt to offset the amount that you can exclude. Now, you've done it in the budget, but it wasn't done correctly on the recap, so they made the recap raise the money instead of reducing the bond premium that you had reserved for it. I've corrected that. That's kind of a one-time fix. It's going forward correctly, but you gained 21,000 from releasing the bond premiums. 48,500. If you remember, I said the three numbers combined with your real estate and personal property receivables and taking the difference of deferred equals your allowance. This is the change in allowance that you had between 17 and 18. You gained 48,500 there. Same thing with the fund balance deficits, the hits that they make. We had more hits this year than we had the year before, so we lost 69,500 in hits. And then the two bigger numbers, expenditure budget turnbacks, 664,150. Keep in mind that a good portion of that came from SAFER. The SAFER, you were asking about what it costs to add on the additional, and that's why I mentioned in the benefit section where the retirement and the town share of health insurance and the town share of FICA, it was fully funded to cover all of the employees. When the money came in from SAFER, you're getting some reimbursement back for those costs. That was able to pay for those costs, which left money to turn back in those accounts. So some of that was in that 664,000 that got turned back. And then in the revenue budget overages, this is money more than what you anticipated to get, 600,950. And then that's how you get to about 1,333,000. Any questions?
When we're doing the budget and the assessor gives us, or it's in that form, I'm sorry, I forget the
estimated
terminology.
Estimated receipts?
Yes,
Yes.
that's, we've carried the number of 200,000 or 250, right? Somewhere in there, Robin, for the last few years.
I don't remember what it is.
The growth, I'm sorry, the growth
Yeah.
factor.
Oh, new growth.
New growth.
Yeah.
And we've always carried somewhere between 200, 220,
Yeah.
because we want to be conservative. It actually is, it's actually 800,000 is what come in, and that's where this other 6 come from? That's what I'm trying to understand, Rob, just to,
Some of these could be the meals tax came in higher than we estimated.
okay, so
Some
it's
of
not,
it-
this is not real estate
Not
per
real
se.
estate,
Okay,
usually.
all right. That's, I just want to make sure I understood that.
So,
We might have got a grant refund that we didn't know we were gonna get.
Yep.
So to be clear, we right now don't know what those were. Do you have the details on that?
Of what?
The
Of
600, what
the
the 600
revenues.
was, yeah.
They're primarily, like motor vehicle excise is your biggest chunk. That's kind of the moving target. Interest was actually double over what it was the year before. So the economy is improving, so you're seeing some of that improvement.
Okay.
Can I ask that again? Do we have specifics on what those were?
I can get you specifics, I didn't print them out for
Thank you.
today, but not all of them are gonna impact your free cash. They're not really looking at your real estate side when they're looking
Yeah,
at that.
okay. I was just trying to make sure that I knew that there was a difference between the two.
That's why you see that receivable and deferred going in and out, because they're kind of removing the real estate and personal property off of the calculations. You pretty much guaranteed to collect that somehow, whether you're putting a tax taking on someone. The ones that are moving, flowing are like motor vehicle. That's typically the hardest one to kind of judge.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, so how would we know if we projected new growth at 250 and it came in at 500?
The assessor would have done that. So that what they're gonna do is factor your rate based on that. So your tax rate will take into account, when you set your rate, that's where the new growth will come in.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's where I was getting confused. One is more of a projection than an actual receipt. This is receipts.
These are
But not
receipts.
necessarily just from real estate taxes, it's a.
It's the other stuff.
Right,
The,
right.
what happens with the new growth is when they certify the new growth, when then they set your tax rate, they're gonna factor that in, and the actual rate will either be lower or higher based on whether you were over or under on what you judged.
Yeah, no, as Joe said, it would be interesting to see the breakdown of that 600 and 950, to see, is it meals tax, is it fuel
Right.
tax, excise tax? Just one time, Don, just so
Yep.
that we all get it.
Yeah, if you email it to me, then I'll make sure everybody gets a copy.
And one thing to remember is we didn't have a big snow and ice deficit, which we usually carry every year. So that added to this. This would have been significantly lower because it's usually 250 to 300,000 per year that we have a deficit in snow and ice.
Mhm.
That would have been a hit. They would have deducted that,
Mhm.
had you not funded that.
I'm not sure I followed that.
The snow and ice?
So if you have a negative balance, you've spent more, which you're allowed to
Yep.
do, you've spent more than you appropriated for snow and ice, they will reduce that right off your free cash certification, and they will force you to raise that on the recap, so it's almost like a double hit to you initially.
Right. So
And-
I
and then
don't
it
see
comes
how
back.
last winter would have made a positive effect on our free cash.
Because we didn't have to raise it. We had a bad year, but you funded it at the Maytown meeting, which is unusual for Charlton, so there was no negative hit to your free cash.
Thank you.
Because all this money is from last year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why the years are confusing, because I'm saying it's FY19 certification, but it's looking at what happened in FY18. It's
Right.
looking back to the year before. Your question on new growth, you won't know that until we go to set the rate in probably November, December timeframe.
Right.
That's when that'll play in.
Mhm. Okay.
All right, just thinking a little bit ahead, with the 2.5 that we passed on 2000, we're in 19, so it'll be 2020, we'd have more of the new growth, we'd have more of that to use for the town, because schools shouldn't be asking for any more than, because they've already got the 2.5, so they should be able to cover themselves.
Well, it's not necessarily regarding the growth, it's just that they're not gonna be taking a large.
But that's what I mean, yeah.
But yes, so generally in the last few years, they were taking all of the 2.5 and the growth combined because we were having such large assessments. This year, we'll have a little bit of a cushion to fix some budget pieces that we need to look at.
Yeah, one year we'll get a medium side, next year we'll get a smaller one, the third year they'll have used all their money. And they're 2.5. Any other questions for Donna?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
This was a great explanation.
It's tough to explain because one's very technical of how they do it, and the other's kind of the thought process of how did you get to those numbers? Because they're not doing a calculation of budget to actual, and you're taking the difference. They're taking your total revenue, your total expenses, what was your ending fund balance? So it's definitely a different thought process, but I get approximately where it comes from. I did a lot of closing of stuff and cleaned up a lot of stuff. So that's in there, those old articles and some of the encumbrances that I knew about that were not correct. One was just an article that was in twice in the reserve. It was like $25,000. It only needed to be in once, but it got listed twice by error.
Should it be easier next year to do this calculation, now that you've cleaned up a lot of?
Well, I mean, this was easier than last year. Last year was really, I will never live last year again. And the reason I say that is, when you do the balance sheet, the state requires it to be very detailed. You're just seeing a snapshot. You have like 200 funds. They want to see the balance sheet for 200 individual funds. Last year when I stepped in, the funds were, you had maybe 15, and then they were all commingled within those 15. So every one of them had to be separated out, which makes it very difficult. The fund balance was being kept separate, but none of those other, the withholdings, the notes payable, cash, all those were kind of commingled, and that took a lot of time to separate it back out. Now you have separate funds, so it's easy just to line them up on an Excel spreadsheet, you put them in, and I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out who borrowed this money and what note payable is that one, and so this year was better. I'm just trying to make sure that everything's been done, that I can tie out and vet every single number. This bond premium had to go back 2 years, wasn't reduced, they made you raise it. Didn't need to, so those little things that slipped through. There was we've done a lot of work this year on water and sewer and making sure we understand privilege fees, betterments, what's remaining in debt, what needs to be reserved. So we've done that. We have a mother file, we call it, it's massive. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's massive. But it does clear up a lot of those questions. And part of the reason I say that, privilege fees are typically collected after a betterment project, somebody's jumping in and you collect it all up front. There's some charge you don't get it for free because other people had to pay a betterment. Most betterments are paid over time. Here, privilege fees they're allowing people to pay over time, but the system doesn't know. So once they put it in to pay over time, it thinks it's a betterment. So to try to separate the two, you can't do it on the computer system. So we have this massive mother file that we have them segregated, so we can tell which was privilege fees, which was betterments, which ones are being paid over time. And so now we can see it visually. Computer system, once you bill over time, it's a betterment in computer law. No other questions?
No, I guess you're all set for now.
Just,
Okay.
if I may, Donna,
Yep.
just one question. How are receipts trending this year?
I haven't even looked, to be honest with you. I've only posted July, so I'd only be able to give you 1 month at this point. Be helpful if I have some help in my office. Was able to get this balance sheet done because I had 3 weeks of an intern that I could just throw everything else that needed to be done and let me focus on getting this done, and actually was done early.
She did a great job getting free cash certified.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I jumped
very
all
early.
over having that opportunity and said, after he goes back to school, I'm not gonna be able to do this balance sheet, I gotta do it now. And so, stayed on it.
Are we making any progress in getting an assistant?
I think the 24th is the date for the deadline for submissions.
Did we get anybody?
So it's out to advertise this?
Yeah.
Who would like to think so? I don't know
Yeah,
the numbers.
yes, but I haven't seen them yet, I haven't had time to go look to see what's come in.
So we are interviewing for the facilities technician as well as for a IT person.
Okay, I guess you're all set.
One other thing, we want to thank you again for your support on the website. We have a kickoff meeting next week, so we have contracted with what was used to be Civic Plus, it's now Civic Gauge or something. So I would invite you, if any of you would like to come to the kickoff and see what the new website can do and how we're gonna roll it out. We're looking at being able to have departments have more hands-on and to be able to update their own information. And we'll be rolling the police and fire also into the whole website concept, so it'll all look the same, so.
When are you gonna do
We're
that?
pretty excited about that. it is it's gonna be Tuesday the 25th at 5:30 here. Invited. Hi, you're ready.
You're up.
All right. Thank you for coming early.
You bet. Well, I was just on conservation, so it worked out.
Taxes are great.
So, good evening. Unfortunately, I don't have much information to present to you because the possible capital improvement we're looking at is still being kind of designed or trying to find out what the real issue is and to get a cost estimate together. So the way that the sewer treatment plant works is there's 10 RBCs that are supposed to work to treat the water to remove ammonia and BOD. For the past, I'm going to say 10 years or more, 2 of those RBCs, RBCs 1 and 2, which are original to the plant, have been offline due to leaking issues and really, because it's been so long, we're not really sure. So in the last couple months, we've had Veolia look at those to try and identify what the problem is and come up with maybe a course of action to fix them. They've given us an estimate to replace them of approximately $500,000. And the commission really hasn't been, I guess, in favor of spending that much money to do that. So instead of replacing them, we're trying to see, because the technology hasn't changed, what can we do to repair what's there? So we've had Veolia bring in some, I guess, some of their outside operators to do an inspection of them. And what they found so far has been pretty promising, and they're still working on writing the report, which is why I don't have too much information to present to you tonight. However, if everything does work out well with special town meetings so close, I at least want to get this on your radar, so if I can get a cost together to present at town meeting, we have approximately $800,000 in retained earnings for sewer that we'd like to use to maybe fund this capital project to get these RBCs 1 and 2 back on track. Initial estimates are, just again, throwing numbers out there, anywhere from $50,000 to $175,000 or $200,000 to repair RBCs 1 and 2. And
Each or?
no, for both.
For both.
So that's to improve what's there and to fix what's there, and also do some minimal improvements of putting some covers on there and some ventilation to have them kind of be in compliance with what the rest of the RBCs are like. So to look at it as a capital improvement, to be able to increase our treatment capacity by 20% for that small amount of money, if everything falls into place with the report I get from Veolia, hopefully I'll be able to present that to you before a special town meeting for consideration and approval. The Water Sewer Commission has a meeting next Monday, the 24th, and also on October 1st. So depending when we get that information, they'll have that in front of them to make a decision to possibly present to special town meetings. So I mentioned it to Robin because, like I said, October 15th will be here before we know it. And I just wanted to make sure that, one, it could be done as a transfer instead and not need its own warrant article, which it sounds like it can be, as an interdepartmental transfer from retained earnings, which is good. So we can, that gives us, I believe, until the night of town meeting to put that final number into the motion. So if the Finance Committee is okay with that, that's kind of like how I'd like to move forward and have that flexibility.
Is this exactly what this enterprise fund is meant to do?
This is retained earnings, so this is just like your free cash. This is what we get certified at the end of the year for funds that weren't used or additional revenues that came in that we didn't account for. So again, right now, from what we received from Donna, that our retained earnings are $800,000 for sewer. And that's its own separate enterprise account.
So if we're lucky, we're looking around over 50, less than 175 to 200?
Yes, I believe just the covers alone to bring them up to standards with the other RBCs will be 50,000, and then whatever repairs need to be done to the tubs themselves will be above and beyond that. So 50,000 minimum, possibly. If it's over $200,000, I don't think we'll move forward with doing it because it won't be cost effective. You're almost bridging the gap to get rid of your 30-year-old technology and try and replace it with something newer. And so
you're working on that, and you'll be coming back later with?
Yes,
Solutions.
once that report's done and the commission votes on which path they want to take, we'll definitely present that information to you for approval as well.
Okay.
So you've got 10 of these, 2 have been out of service for a few years.
A long time.
Is it that you have no backup if one fails now, or does it, how many does,
How
I'm
many
just
does it-
wondering how you can have 2 that haven't been working for so long and still function?
It's, luckily, we don't have all of the concentration that the plant is designed for. So the full plant with 10 RBCs is designed to treat so many pounds of waste per day of concentration of ammonia, of BOD. It's different for each constituent. And because we're not receiving that full amount, we're able to run with only 8. Depending on the time of year, depending on the concentration of waste, 8 is not enough. And it differs day to day, especially when you look at what we get from the 2 MTA rest areas on certain days. The strength of their waste is absurd compared to what we get on a Thursday or Friday, what we get from them on a Sunday or Monday when traffic is heavy. So it'll help us take those high days and be able to treat that waste like we do on a Wednesday or Thursday.
Does it mean right now you have to stockpile for a certain, okay.
No, that's not
The 8 are doing it,
The 8 are doing it,
barely, but,
depending on the day,
On the day,
exactly, barely.
okay.
So the 2 extras will, in theory, give us 20% more ability to treat.
Capacity.
Yes.
All right,
If I may, if you lose an RBC on a heavy day, you're gonna have a problem.
If we go down to 7 on a
Right.
heavy day, yes,
Right.
it's,
So that's what the 2.
Yeah.
we're gonna violate.
But
They- You always need some kind of a backup for some of the equipment.
I would think most of
Especially
the
on
time you're
this.
probably only running on 6.
Actually, when I first started, probably a year ago, they were running on 7.
Were they?
They got the 8th one up and running, and that's been, we've been running on all 8 for probably the last 6 months, and it's been helpful.
But
So
if
that's
one
why-
goes down, you've got a problem.
Correct. If one goes down, it just kind of, it magnifies the issue of the other 7, definitely. So,
But never a permit violation, right?
no, over the ammonia we have in the
Have you?
last, yeah, unfortunately,
Oh,
yes.
you've been off the commission too long. then.
Yes, you're missing all the fun. No, unfortunately, we have had, not by a lot, but we have had some ammonia violations in the last 6 months.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're kind of walking that tightrope right now, so.
Where do you put the wastewater?
After it's treated, it flows into Katy Brook.
Katy Brook, okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for, and we'll expect you back in a week or 2, whenever you,
Whenever we get that information,
Yeah.
whenever the commission makes a decision, definitely I'll come back and present that to you for consideration.
very good.
All right?
thanks, Pete.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Do you want me to go through what I have so far for special town meeting article?
Yeah.
As you know, the Board of Selectmen opened the warrant at their last meeting. They'll be closing it next Tuesday. So I have been working on a draft of the warrant articles that I'm aware of. These may change depending on what the chairman and board decide. So as you know, usually in a special town meeting, we have the stock articles up in the front, same ones we have every year, which for Article 1 is the appropriation of funds for unpaid bills of a prior year. So we're checking with the departments right now to find out if we have any. Hopefully, we'll be able to just bypass that. But again, as you know, in past years, we carry it because if we take it off, one will pop up. Article 2, intra-departmental transfers and/or appropriations for the budget. So there's a few things that we're working on. The water sewer has made a request to reimburse the salary of the water sewer coordinator in the amount of $86,166 from the RRFA water superintendent salary. General insurance, VFIS increase because of the additional staffing that we've had, namely those 9 firefighters. And other salaries, VFIS is just police and fire. We have a deficit of $32,000. The fire salaries, again, the chief talked to you about that. I think that there's 2 things that I would suggest you consider, and I'm gonna kind of mull it over myself. If you're thinking of just saying, okay, we'll fund those additional 5 firefighters for the end of the year to see if you're gonna get the grant, then I would recommend that we leave that in the interdepartmental transfer.
if you are thinking that you'd like to kind of have one and done, and take it to town meeting and ask them if they're going to support the additional 5 firefighters and be transparent about that, then we probably want to pull that out of here and put it into its own separate warrant article. So it would be firefighters, that way, what you would do is have knowledge for next year. You wouldn't have that question mark, do you keep them, do you not? It would be, you've already gone to town meeting has approved the funding. We start automatically with taking $260,000 off the top and putting that into the firefighters' budget. But you have the debate on the floor if you have it in a separate warrant article. I probably would need to know that by Tuesday, so if you have thoughts on it, or.
By next
whatever.
Tuesday?
Yes.
Yep.
Now, what I can do, if you think that this is something you want more time to talk about, I can ask the board for a placeholder, so when they close the warrant, I inform them that this will either be here or its own, and you want another meeting to think about it. We certainly could do that.
So we need it by next Wednesday, though.
I think so, yeah. Well, you're gonna start your discussion anyway on what you're going to support and what you're not. I'm gonna come to you with a recommendation. But it would help me to know, what your direction and thoughts are on whether or not you would want it in a separate warrant article. Police salaries, union contract, we settled the contract, it's $38,122. As you know, we've been having some issues with getting quality police officers. Part of that has been because of the Quinn bill. In the new contract, it gives Quinn back. Right now, it's only going to affect, I think, one person, because everyone else is grandfathered. But it will allow us to be competitive as we're going forward. And the police contract was settled at 222, I believe. That's all I have for the interdepartmental at this point. Now, this may change, but this is what I'm kind of working with at this point. Article 3 is the capital items and related contracts. Tonight you've heard from the departments. I will be putting together a recommendation for you for next week. Article 4 is transfer from stabilization funds to and from stabilization funds. I will try to work with the free cash to try and see if we can come back to a 1.2 number in stabilization. So I may be not recommending all of the things that have been asked for. Some things may be able to be deferred. It sounds like some of them may not be ready to move forward anyway. There seem to be a lot of unanswered questions, so I'll follow up with those departments. But that will be my goal, because that has been the direction from you. If you would like something different, just maybe once I'm done with this, we can have a little bit of discussion on some of these items. The next one is acquisition of easements needed for a water line culvert repair. This is just the Exxon Mobil water line extension. So we need to have town meeting approve some easements. That is sponsored by the Water Sewer Commission. Article 6 would be to create the water stabilization, and Article 7 is to create a sewer stabilization fund. When Peter comes back to your next meeting, you could have a conversation with him on why he's recommending that, unless, Donna's gone. I was gonna have her speak to that, but my understanding is that the Water Sewer Commission is trying to look at having those capital funds just like we have our capital funds, and start moving their retained earnings over into that and trying to build up a balance so that they can have a place to go when they have funding for needs for capital. Article 8 is the personnel bylaw.
Just so that I would understand it, if they move that into if they were to form their own stabilization and move it over, meaning they can spend it without having any other approval?
Oh, no, they'd have to come back to town meeting, and it would require a 2/3 vote. And it could only be for capital.
Yep.
So it would really depend on what the article said in the motion.
If I may, and it's also, I think, less restrictive than it is, more restrictive than it is now.
Okay.
because they keep it in retained earnings, which is just a majority vote. I don't think retains is a two-thirds. It's a
It's a majority.
transfer.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Article 8 is a personnel bylaw amendment classification plan update. One of the goals of the board, they've been talking about trying to look at salaries and classifications to be competitive. As you know, we've had quite a bit of turnover. We would like to stop that. We work much better when we have a institutional memory within and a seasoned staff. So the Personnel Board met last night, and they have made a couple of recommendations. One would be moving the town planner, director of assessing, and building commissioner from an N7 to an N8. And including an IT technician, which I don't think we've done that yet. And this is still draft, so I'm taking a look to make sure we don't have any other categories that we need to. We are in the process of clerical union negotiations, and I think at this time it will be helpful to take the clerical, take the non-union, kind of juxtapose them, and then check the salaries of each and the classification of each. You may have, I think we might have talked to you about the Pay Equity Act, and there's a requirement, and it'll help us for, at least if you've done within the last 3 years, an internal audit. So we're gonna start to look at that also, and make sure that salaries of between men and women, or young and old, are in line and appropriate. I can also tell you that we've done a really good job at keeping the negotiations low, and because we've needed to and we've not had funding, and I think that it is important to take a look at the staffing and their levels and their pay scales, especially within this year, where we do have a little a breathing room, so to speak, because of the override. We can fix some deficits that we have people that have been working here that are significantly underpaid in compared to surrounding towns. So I was just kind of queuing you up and getting you ready, because we're gonna be having that conversation, I think, soon. And we'll be adding the assistant town accountant, because I'm not sure we did that either. Article 9, gas tax, the local gas tax. So if you remember, several years ago, the town meeting voted to ask the legislature for a special act for a gas tax. It went to the legislature, the town of Lee had done it, then we did it, and then it got assumed into an omnibus bill, somewhat like the meals tax, so that it would become across the state a local option tax. That did not make it out of committee. Enough years have kind of gone by that in me asking the representatives, where is that? Are you still moving it through? I've been informed that we need to do it again. So I don't think we go away on this one. I think it's important. So we're going to bring it back and see if town meeting will reauthorize the request. And I liken that to the same as the meals tax, where there is some significant traffic here through the Mass Pike. Many of our calls go to the Mass Pike. It makes sense. It makes sense that if there's a local option gas tax, that would go towards our roads and our bridges, and we have a lot of capital that we need to do. The next one's a zoning bylaw amendment for marijuana establishments, and this is sponsored by the planning board. And I believe they are meeting shortly on this. If you're interested, take a look at the calendar for the planning board's agendas. And then you also have a petition that was turned in to the town. And the petition is requesting to, and I read it so I don't misspeak, It's to see if the town will vote to amend the town's general bylaw by adding a new chapter and section that would provide as follows, and to further amend the table of contents to add said chapter and section. Chapter 157 marijuana, Section 157-4 host agreement. Selectmen shall comply with the provisions of Mass General Law 90, Chapter 94G, and obtain town meeting approval of the terms of any host agreement pursuing to Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, prior to signing. Any Mass General Law, Chapter 94G host agreement previously signed by the Board of Selectmen which does not comply with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 3D is declared null and void, or take any other action relative thereto. This general bylaw will protect the town of Charlton from host agreements which do not comply with Mass state law, and everything I read was part of the petition, not my comments. And that's all I have at this time. So the only other one, the board did vote, there's a placeholder for a zoning marijuana ban, if that's gonna be put on. Just to let you know, the company that is going up to VGG has, because this has a financial impact for you, and I know you've been following it, has contacted the town and said that they want to do a friendly court case to ask the land court to rule on whether or not a general bylaw can prohibit marijuana when there's a zoning bylaw that regulates it. It'll be helpful, I think, to everybody if that decision comes swiftly and we know where they stand. So we are in litigation at this point. And I think that's all I have. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to let you know.
Any questions? No questions? I guess you're all set.
Thank you.
So they're gonna close that warrant next Tuesday, and depending on what we just talk about later, hold a placeholder if that's what we choose for Wednesday?
I would tell them that we just need a little more time. So yes, they've allowed us to close the warrant with a placeholder, and if it's needed, we keep it. If not, it just kind of rolls off. And that's been a nice way to manage the warrant.
Okay, so what's next? Do you want to try the goals? Everybody should have gotten a copy. I don't know if you have it with you or not, but. And at the same time, I have the note with it for the duties of the finance committee, so. Let's see. I think the first, these are all, at this point, these are all suggestions. We haven't voted on having these as goals or anything like that, but these are suggestions. The first one I have on this list is that budget should be done by the first Wednesday of May, which gives us about 2 weeks before town meeting, I think, or something in that range. Have any discussion on that, or?
No. Is that very feasible?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. We're talking about the reserve fund transfer.
Okay.
Well,
Is that intentional, you didn't hear us?
yeah. No, as a proposed goal for the finance committee, have the budget done by the first Wednesday in May. And that, I think, probably would be allowed for $1,000 adjustments and things like that, but basically, they have the budget done for the first Wednesday in May. Is that reasonable?
Are you asking for it from me to be presented to you by the first Wednesday in May?
Yeah.
Because even if I present it to you 2 days before town meeting, you know that it tends to change. If you're looking for me to give you a draft budget for you to look at, and because I'm still toggling back and forth between you and the Board of Selectmen at the time, so, yeah, put it in, and if we need to make adjustments, I really don't know. I think I'm stumbling because I'm not exactly sure when I usually bring it to you anyway, so I haven't, I probably asked to have time to think about that.
All right. I think
I think what we'd like is a budget that's 99.6% done 2 weeks ahead of, just so that we're comfortable that there's not gonna be any 8% change in the 2 days previous to. I think that's probably our biggest issue, is just making
So-
sure that we're close, okay?
So when do you usually have your hearings?
usually
Will
we
you
start
have all of
in,
your hearings done before that?
yeah, we usually start in February. We're usually done by the end of April, in there, depending. So by that time, we should have a pretty good idea what the budget is, because you usually give us an estimated budget ahead of time so we can look at it. And I realize that no matter how we work it out, in the last few days, there's always 1,000 here or 2,000 there for adjustments. And we'd probably have to vote on that the last Wednesday before town meeting. But we still have to vote on it, the last official budget, we have to vote on that just before town meeting. But if we're at 99% or in that range,
I think that's a great goal.
okay.
Try and have it 99%.
Because it drives the schedule before it,
Yeah.
when we meet.
Yes, it does.
So as a start, how does that sound to the committee?
Good.
Do you want to vote on that as having, quote, our first goal?
Yeah, well, are we gonna come up with a goal sheet, or are we gonna vote on individual goals?
Either way you want to do it.
Do you have an extra goal sheet so we can follow along?
Oh,
No.
I emailed it out, but, you got one I can use?
You know, it's one of the few I didn't print.
You've got one I can use, so.
Well, I got a bunch of notes all over it.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I can see it.
Keith has it written on
Oh,
his,
yeah.
this is blank.
Yeah, Keith is blank, so you can,
You get me to agree to the top ones, and I don't know what's underneath them.
oh, underneath it, it's 100% budget. Again, these are suggestions. What we did a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, at that meeting, I called Joe John, so I apologize.
I've been called worse.
Don't be called for late for dinner, right? And these are suggestions that we mailed out, and different people on the committee wrote back to me, and I wrote up these as, quote, suggested goals. And at the same time, you probably don't have it, although you probably understand it. I also put with it the duties of the finance committee. So as we go through these, from the bylaw, they kind of have to match up a little bit, so. We can't have a goal of having the highways plowed, second day in May when it's all still snowing, but, all right, so we've tentatively agreed at least that we can work with one. I'll circle that one. The second one is a stabilization fund to be at the state recommended level of 10% for the town's annual income, of the town's annual income. And I believe that's just the state's suggestion, that we have approximately 10%.
They give you a range, but I think you have always said
It's between 10 and
10%.
15%,
Yeah.
is what it says in the recommendations.
What are you using for the benchmark cord? Are you using from the revenue budget?
Yeah,
So
the
the bottom line.
$29 million.
So we'd be
Since you
looking,
like to round numbers, I think let's just call it 29
Well, I
million.
didn't know if you were using like from the actual revenue collected or from the revenue budget. What are you doing your 10%?
so we'd be like to have it up around 3 million.
Mhm.
And again, it's always, I'm a $1,000 accountant myself, so.
So we'll make a recommendation on we'll do the calculation for you, and we'll recommend a recommendation on what number we'll use, so you're consistent,
Mhm.
okay, and then you can
Okay.
put that in here?
Okay, all right, so that one, we're working on that one.
And we do have a reserve policy, so maybe we've done that. So that will be part of that too.
Yeah, okay. These are in no particular order, they're just the way I numbered them. A biannual meeting with the department head just to review the department's operation for the, say, first 6 months of the year. Of, how are they doing? Are they doing all right with the money? Are their plans going along? Is the highway okay? Is the police department working? But just a biannual meeting, in other words, 6 months from the year, we'd call them in and, not necessarily call them in, but we'd have a meeting, just discuss their situation and their budget and in their department and how it's running. Doesn't seem unreasonable to have them come in, once during the year just to get an update on the situation of the department.
I think they would welcome that. I think that they would appreciate that you take that interest in checking in with them, so. And it gives you more additional, information when they get here at the end of the year.
Biannual, every other year, or twice in 1 year?
Twice in 1 year.
Twice in 1 year.
In other words, they'd be in here in budgets when we were doing that.
Right, so if we met with them sometime in November, December, so how's the first 6 months going? We know we're gonna see them in February or March when they're coming for their budget reviews. So there's your 2 times a year that
Yeah.
are definitive meetings. Where are you at?
And you organize that.
All right, so. Number 4, and if establish a 5-year capital plan, but don't we already have one of those?
I do that every year when I send out the request for budgets. We also ask them to update their capital plan, and I generally send that out. So I think you get that as part of the package when I give you the budget.
All right, so we can call that,
And then again, in 6 months, I say, okay, so we're coming up to special town meeting. Have you had any changes based on emergencies? And then we make some adjustments, which is why the one you had is a little outdated because some of their needs changed.
So while we're on that particular one, so the one that you just gave us has these red X's on it, okay?
But-
Are those red X's gonna be filled in between now and next Wednesday?
Well, it depends on the red X's and what they're for. It's part of my kind of draft, and remember I told you it's a draft? You know, I'm always having working documents that are kind of living in, so that I don't miss anything. So if I put red X's or anything in red, it means I need more information. Those red X's, I believe, are the public safety building. So that's kind of left over from annual town meeting. Like I said, we're going through the capital now, and we're making adjustments. So that is from last June, and I don't know what that public building will be, so. Once we know, I'll fill it in, or it disappears because we don't need it.
okay.
Yeah, so if I can go back to the capital plan for a second, part of this is good, but it's here's what we have in the fleet, here's what which most of the people came with tonight, but highway seems to drift the most from here's plan, but that's kind of really what I want. And their stuff costs a lot of money.
He will do whatever we ask of him. If we ask him to put the fleet together, he'll put the fleet together. If you wanna take a tour down there, I know he always offers that when we're looking at capital, to come down to the, operations building, do a walkthrough, he'll show you what his needs are. Whatever you need, just let me know, or let Mr. Foskett know. So we'll give you any level of detail that you're looking for.
Yeah, in this, if I may, Mr. Chair, in this
Go
case,
ahead.
it's not so much the detail, it's like, if we have a 5-year plan, if you meet in, when did we meet, May,
Yeah.
April? And then, you're 6 months out, it just seems like there's some changes that happen, which you gotta expect. But I think in the police chief's case, that's probably gonna be as consistent as
Yeah.
2 of these, 1 of those, boom, boom. Because I know before I came, I looked at the request from some of the highway based on what I thought we were gonna have for numbers. And some of the bigger items seem to shift out,
I know.
right?
No, right, this
They
was
added
in this
50.
column, and now all of a sudden it's in this column.
Yeah.
Right, part of that shifting is once I find out what free cash is, and I go, oh, the wish list is generally 1.2 million or 700,000, and I know we're only gonna be able to appropriate 500,000 to maintain your 10%, then things are gonna start moving down. I'm gonna go to them and say, you've got 4 items, give me your priorities. Because then I'm gonna start making some, and they have to tell not only what their priorities are, but why. What's an emergency, so that kind of takes precedent. And then the things that we can't afford, you'll see them get bumped down. And sometimes they're bumped down, like the archival storage, which was $250,000. I think we bumped that down for 7 years. But we don't wanna lose it, we still know we need it, so it just kind of gets put out until more is known or a better solution comes along.
I'd still like to digitize all that, but we'll see how that goes. Well, it's part of the law is they want a piece of paper. So you can digitize everything and find everything, but if they want the paper, you still gotta go find a little piece of paper. And I looked downstairs when we were down there, and they had a tax bill from 1903 for, I don't know, a wagon or something like that, but it's probably gone.
We keep it all. And if I could just go back to Joe's point, different towns do their capital budgets very differently. We could put a book together for you of, all the inventory, everything we've got, and keep updating that, and spreadsheets and all that. This town, we've pretty much kept it simple because that's what's been asked. If you want a higher level, or you see another town's capital plan and you say, gee, let's do this because it'll give more information, it'll provide more transparency, let's get it up on the web, we'll work with you with that. So,
Okay.
after she gets her own person on board.
Sunday afternoons are
I
still
heard her
available.
stop breathing for a minute. Yeah.
Shorten the posting.
Oh, my God.
All right, the one we have fifth is establish a 3-year spending plan, which would basically be 3 years of budget, basically. I don't think we've ever done a 3-year budget.
Are you looking to do those calculations? Are you looking for us to provide those calculations? What would you like to have a workshop on assumptions, and we build the assumptions and build the 3-year spending plan that way?
Yeah, you'd probably have to have a meeting.
You're looking at like just a revenue budget projected for 3 years, forecast.
Yeah, just a foot, right.
I think the departments would have a stroke if I told them to make 3 years' worth of budgets.
No, but you have agreed to give us the budget in Excel spreadsheet format for our own use, and if you gave us a class or a seminar on how you do projections in your thought process, okay, we can incorporate that into an Excel spreadsheet. Not asking the department heads to forecast out 3 years, but I think that's what you're looking for, Joe, right? Is some way that we could at least get a feel,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
And as long as you're willing to keep giving us the budgets in Excel spreadsheet, which we all understand is for our own use, that would work.
Yeah.
That would work. But we
Yeah.
need to know how what's your methodology for forecasting, so we could use the same thing.
And everything 3 years out, the 3rd year out, is an educated guess. In fact, I used to do these kind of budgets, and at the end, they call it a swag. It's a scientific wild-ass guess, because you're making all these assumptions, but the further out you go, the sketchier they become.
What becomes difficult is a good chunk of your expenditure budget is salary driven, so
Yeah.
it depends on where you are in contracts,
Right.
how much information you have, and that varies. I don't think they're all at the same time.
But it gets, in
Yeah.
business, we do 5-year plans, but part of the reason you do that is because you start to think about, well, what am I gonna need for growth, right? We talked tonight about funding the fire department, hey, we got a grant, et cetera, where's the police department think they're gonna be in 3 years? Based on what they're seeing for, those kind of things, and that's a conversation. Nothing's gonna be held, it's gonna be held to the, oh, you said this, and then, but if you start thinking about, hey, if there's extra money coming into the town, where are we gonna allocate it? Some of these answers are there ahead of time. I think if you think about the way the town's growing and certain businesses coming to town, we're gonna definitely have to fund more police officers. That's just the reality. So, when you get to next year's budget or the year after, people aren't going, why are you gonna add police officers? We've been talking about it for 2 years.
Well, at 5, I'll say, we'll put down, we'll work out a time where we can have a seminar, where we can work with Donna and just come up with some ideas on that. 6, review the budget process. I'm not quite sure what that one meant.
So I wrote that one again. It's not, I think the budget, for me, going through it the first time, it was clunky. And so, that doesn't have to necessarily be a goal, but something that I think we need to, maybe refine as we go along.
Okay.
And I think Robin stated it earlier, say, well, you get to a point where you're going back and forth between finance and selectmen. I got an answer for that. Let's have a joint meeting.
Yeah, I think
And
that's.
not
I've
have
done
the,
that in the past.
that's, makes it easier so that we're not, if they, and then just get together in a room and knock it out. Then you don't have to go back and forth and go, they approved it, they didn't, now what?
Well, that was number 7.
One of the things we would do is that when we get to that 90%, or, there was just some, they would come to your meeting, they would sit here, they wouldn't post, but a couple of them would come in and join you. So, I think if you wanna put an invitation, choose which meeting you would like them to come,
Mhm.
we can work on that.
Well, that's number 7.
That's number 7.
7 and 8, actually,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of combined.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could work that out in sometime in maybe late April or something like that. We've all got a pretty good idea what the budget is. We could all sit together and just look at the details from each other's point of view, what we need.
And that would also be a good time to go over that 3-year projection,
Yeah.
because they're as involved with that, if not more, than we are.
Right. And where their head's at with growth for the town and direction, et cetera, because.
Right. So that could be an agenda item in that. What do you got next?
I think this one's yours, the annual
Oh,
review.
annual review of the audit, yeah. I did put that one down, because I found it very helpful the way you sat and showed us where free cash comes from. I knew what free cash was, I can read the Wikipedia definitions, but where does ours come from? I thought that was very, very helpful, right? And yes, if we need to get into more of the weeds, we can, but, so I thought maybe that same kind of overview of the audit might be helpful for us.
It may be helpful to have the auditor come in.
Or let him come in and do it, yes.
Then you get kind of an unbiased
Mhm.
opinion.
Again, just to help us get a better understanding of what constitutes this document.
If you looked at what I submitted for a balance sheet for the DOR under their requirements, and then tried to compare that to the financial statement, you're
Yeah.
not gonna be able to match it.
But a lot of times, Donna, it's, and everybody will say it about financial statements, it's not the numbers in the first 8 pages, okay? It's the 42 notes behind the numbers that I think we want to start to get through and go through and better understand.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
As a school committee member, after the audit was complete, the audit firm would come and present the audit to the school committee. And I don't know that happens in the town. It may present it to the selectmen, I don't know.
We have done it
But
before.
it would be helpful for us to hear.
That would seem like be a good time for a joint meeting. So they could talk to the selectmen and us at the same time.
Maybe not every year,
Well, yeah.
maybe alternate with the OPEB actuarial study, have that person in and do an explanation, and maybe the following year have the auditor do an explanation. Because it is pretty heavy financial stuff. Maybe you don't need it every year, but alternate them, so you're getting up-to-date information every other year.
And that would be good for the auditor to come in every other year. I also think, though, that we should sit with that audit once a year as a committee and go through those notes and say, hey, 2 years ago, they said you needed to improve a cash drawer, or you needed to improve a whatever, okay? Just so that we know.
Those are that's the management
The
letter.
management letter is right. That's really the
In
meat.
a perfect world, you wouldn't have a management letter.
Yes, I know.
That-
And I've
that-
yet to
that's
see,
my goal.
I've yet to see a financial statement for any organization I've been involved that didn't.
They have to find something.
Oh, no, I
They
have
gotta
had
hand
many,
you a
many
bill.
years in Oxford that there was no management letter, but occasionally, I mean, things slip through and something would come up and then you have to address how you're gonna correct it. But that's my goal, is you get rid of all those,
As many as
as
possible.
many as possible.
The last one is maybe actually Donna's, but review various department adherence to town policy regarding the handling of town's revenue. And I think some of that's got to do with making sure that the various departments that take in cash get it deposited into you.
So that was addressed in one of the first policies we put together, and that because Joanne and I saw our initial problem with that, we addressed that initially, and so they've actually been forced to be in compliance for that. So
Do you-
that was the first one.
Do you have a policy book made of all the policies that we've been putting together?
No.
Well, they are in our folder,
Yeah.
but not in a book.
What?
They are in a folder on our
On your,
Dropbox, yes.
you don't need a hard copy though? No.
You know, I make hard copies when I need it for a particular
Yeah.
You know what
issue,
I'll
but
do is when we've got like 4 more that I need to finish, and then there's some appendix, and then we'll be done with the ones that we were requested to do, then I'll put those in a hard copy for
right,
all of
there
them.
should be
Yeah.
one.
We'll just keep
Yeah.
it on the table so you
Yeah.
can refer to it.
Yeah, there definitely should be one so that we can grab it real quick and look at something that we're
But,
looking
yeah,
for.
revenue was definitely the one that we needed to address right away,
Mhm,
and that has been going much better.
mhm.
The town clerk's office, I think, with a cash register, did they ever use it, or?
I don't think so, I don't know, I don't really look at, I don't see what gets turned over, that's more the treasurer, I get a copy of what's been turned over.
For practical purposes, I'd like to see whatever cash we get deposited as soon as possible.
And that's in there too.
Yeah.
There's a time restriction that they have to abide by.
So seeing as we're talking about financial policies, and you were looking for some direction on free cash, right? Our financial reserve policy that was adopted on July 7th says that we should endeavor, it doesn't say we have to. I realized that after I read it a few times, endeavor to transfer a minimum of 50% of our free cash into our stabilization. How does that fit with I know you've got numbers, Robin, going in your head, okay, on where all this capital is gonna come from. How does that policy fit in with where we're at right now?
Well, I think this year we might be within that range.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the growth, what the town wants to do, because, you know, as Joe has pointed out, you know, why do you have this much in ambulance receipts when you know you're gonna get this much? Well, you gotta plan for that free cash to come back in the surplus. And you always get surprises. You can't plan on the one times, but you've gotta have some cushion in there that says, you know, this is gonna come back in. If
It's
that's
just
what
that
you
we
want,
adopted-
that's what
Policy, and we endorsed it at a subsequent meeting, and says, yes, we will all agree to this. And I would just like to see us use that as a thought process when you're looking at that, okay? And to me, it also helps the average citizen. It has to be voted at town meeting to come out of stabilization. So it's not like we're spending it on something that really we shouldn't be spending on. We're just saying, look, we're gonna put this in here according to our policy. If you wanna spend it, fine, come to a town meeting and appropriate it out of stabilization.
And there's a couple of factors too. You know, I like that word budget being clunky. We're in a clunky phase right now because we're coming out of the recession. You've had stabilization money built into your budget. I think this might be the first year we've not done that. So, once we restore stabilization back to the 1.2, we're not gonna be needing that 400,000 just to get back to ground level. So, I mean, other towns have 25 million in their stabilization. they try to fund many of the things that they need, their capital projects, without borrowing, and they save up. I guess the question comes, is that what Charlton wants to do, and does Charlton want to start to build up its stabilization fund without it, people talk about, well, if you put more in there, if you had 3 million in there, it would get rated. Well, no, not if you do what you're saying and have your capital plan, and they can see, well, wait a minute, this is coming up, and we can see where it's coming in, it's going to be dedicated, it's not gonna get bumped, and we're gonna start funding the things that we really need to fund. Roads and bridges, stormwater, there's just gonna be a lot of things coming forward that we do need to save for, and it does save money if we've saved it and not borrowed.
I've always just believed that, if you're gonna save, you save first and spend what's left, not spend it and, geez, we only have this much little to save, and that's what ends up going to stabilization. And you said we have $613,000 today in stabilization, right? That's what, 2%, 2.5%, all right? That's well below even what we said we wanted as a minimum, okay? I would love to see you take as much of that free cash as possible. If you're asking for my guidance from the Finance Committee, try and hit this 50%, or as close as we can endeavor to get to, okay?
So one of the things to also keep in mind, when the state writes this kind of stuff, everybody is doing things a little bit different. So in other communities, capital outlay has been built into the budget process and it's not done in October, it's done as part of the budget process. So that capacity that you're getting $1 million free cash, in other communities, the capital's being done first, so you're getting a much smaller free cash. So you may get a $400,000 free cash, so you put $200,000 aside into stabilization, but you've already done all your capital. Here, you're not doing your capital.
Right, but if we followed that first model, Donna, I know what you're saying. I would have said then 100% of free cash goes into stabilization, because you've already done your capital, okay? It's just the way that we do it, 50% seems
Well,
to
the
me.
reason they don't in those towns with the 50% is like you said, you have only X amount of dollars in reserve. What if something happened unforeseen? You had a bad winter. The reason why they don't put it into the stabilization is they'll fund that snow and ice if they need it. They leave that capacity. It rolls into the following year free cash. If it's not used, it becomes recertified. It doesn't disappear somewhere. But they do leave themselves some wiggle room if something happens during the year and not have tied it up into a stabilization.
So some of the healthier towns have several million in their stabilization and several million in free cash, and they only spend maybe $1 million of it, and they let that million or more ride. So to pick up the things that Donna's talking about.
Yeah.
We've just been too close to the bone, and we've expanded too fast, and I think with the school, when we had that shift, from assessments and that, I think that really put us backwards. So hopefully we have a lot of development coming in, hopefully we're gonna be able to start to come out of that.
Right, which to me is another reason we should make an effort to start putting the money in the stabilization. Now, we know we've got 2 years, maybe 3, of the ability to use our growth factor, because the school or any other group is not gonna chew it up. So this is money we know in cash that we could put right there without guessing about what next year's growth is gonna be or the following years. A bird in the hand to me is, let's put it in the cage. My thoughts. And that goes along with the goal of, what goal was that?
One? No,
Number two, right? We're already on our way to meeting goal number 2.
yep. Any more discussion on goals and things? We can do this again. I'll rewrite this to a certain extent. I'll send it back out. And,
I don't think it's gotta be in the form of a motion. We just all have to know what we're working.
no, I'm not asking for motion. I'm just saying that I'm gonna rewrite this. I'll send it back out. But for the time being, there's any more discussion on this? Do I hear a motion to adjourn then?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
8:55. Oh, both of them.